Hi, everybody. I'm so happy to be doing this show. I can't tell you. Okay. I have a very special guest here. His name is Darren Franz, and he has a movie site which is really fantastic. It's called Cinema Chat, and we'll talk about that to start. I mean, look, I'm so glad to have him here. Darren, let me tell you, what happened for me was I'm enjoying doing my channel, but I'm looking around for other people of like mind,
Mhm.
people who are kind of interested in the same films that I am, that have really cool stuff to show, have maybe some good memories. And that's what I noticed. Well, they're out there, I know, but where can I find them? And then I came across recently your channel, and I was binging some of your videos. And I said, this guy I would love to have up here and talk to. And thank you so much for coming on here.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's great.
A- Absolutely. And I'll talk a little bit about Cinema Chat, your YouTube channel.
Cinema Chat, I started because I have an extensive movie memorabilia collection. You can see behind me, the basement is full, chock full. When my wife and I bought this house, I was adamant that the basement is mine. It's my domain. It's not a man cave. I hate that term, but it's my museum. It's my shrine to film. And I've been collecting movie memorabilia since I was 7 or 8 years old. And some of it has gotten lost along the way, and some of it I've built up, and I've just been buying stills and posters and lobby cards and all that. And then I want to show this stuff to people. And I thought, well, how could I do that? So I came up with a YouTube channel idea that I could talk about my favorite movies, and I could talk about all of those experiences while showing the memorabilia. And that also might get some of the younger people interested, because a lot of younger people don't know what a lobby card is, or what an arcade card is, or what a lot of these things are, because they're not in use anymore. So that was the impetus of what got it all started. And I've just been having a ball. I really enjoy talking about movies, and just favorite films, and what causes these movies to endure, and especially the old stuff. I love the old stuff, but I love all movies, all genres. Doesn't matter to me. I collect it all.
Mm, That's fantastic. And yeah, I've already learned some things and seen some cool lobby cards and things by surfing around that I have not seen before. I've
Mhm.
got a few. Most of them are in the closet in there, and I have a living room closet in this room. Well, this stuff is decked out. This room is decked out more like the Beatles, because I have another channel called Mean Mr. Mayo.
That's
And that's primarily a Beatles, but also other music channel.
mhm.
And that's what I've dedicated the room to. I've got some stuff this side. Up there, some Planet of the Apes stuff, just a few things, a model and the bank and
Oh
some
yeah.
other things. It's hard to see, but basically, the idea is to make this all Beatles until I get a bigger place, hopefully in a couple of years, in which time I'll be able to display both. I hope I get two rooms, one for movies, one for the music stuff.
Yeah, that'd
That's
be awesome. That'd be
that's
great.
what I'm that's what I'm hoping. So we definitely have similar interests. And right away, I noticed you have a Quentin Tarantino shirt
Yeah.
on it for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. And Tarantino, I noticed, is a favorite of yours, because quite often you have shirts uh, featuring his movies.
Absolutely.
Talk about it.
Yeah, he really impresses me. I mean, his I saw Reservoir Dogs on cable. I didn't get to see it in the theater. I just had heard about it. It was during that time when independents were just starting to, that renaissance in the 90s, and I didn't realize what was going on. I sat down, watched this movie. I was blown away. I could not believe it. And then from then on, I saw every one of his films in the theater, premieres, all that stuff. Terrific, terrific stuff. He is not only is he a great filmmaker, but he's a film historian. And if you listen to him, he has a podcast, and it's called Video Archives. If you listen to him, he's infectious. His love of movies is just infectious, and he puts these things out there that you've never heard of before. And then you track them down, you watch these movies, and it's just phenomenal. I mean, most of the stuff, there's been a few that he's put out there that I've been like, well, that's a little strange. But at the same time, I'm learning so much more just from listening to him and reading his books. He's done 2 books now, and just really terrific director. I mean, he's really a special guy. That's a genius right there, I think.
Yeah, I love Tarantino stuff, and I think a lot of why I like him is because he's a fan like us
Mm-hmm.
of older stuff, and he borrows it and kind of uses a lot of ideas. But I think we were talking off camera here, and you had said it, but he makes it his own.
Yes, and
which
he
is
has an
which is
encyclopedic knowledge of film. I mean,
yeah.
I feel like I know something, but I don't feel like I know anything when I listen to him. He talks about you know, art design guys and set design guys back from the 40s that I've never even heard of before. I got to look these people up. It's just amazing. It's I wish I had that kind of knowledge in my head. I
Mhm.
stumble through my channel forgetting things and forgetting to say stuff and saying the wrong thing and all that. But I mean, I get the point across. But I mean, it's
Yeah,
just amazing with his knowledge. It's unbelievable.
yeah, it is. I've seen a lot of good interviews with him, and the first time I heard of him, I think, was probably Pulp Fiction, which I
Mhm.
saw in the movie theater, and I just loved that. I just remember we saw it late at night. It was very late. It might have been midnight or something.
Mhm.
And I remember the scene that really hit me, among many, was the scene where Uma Thurman and John Travolta come home
Yeah,
after having gone out and had a date,
yeah. Clap,
so to
rap,
speak.
twins.
Yeah, and he goes into the bathroom and she plays the tape of "Girl, You'll Be a Woman Soon,"
Hmm.
which is like my favorite Neil Diamond song, even though it's not the Neil Diamond version, but
Right.
he doesn't sing it. But it doesn't matter. And I was like, oh, this is perfect. Like the way he has music,
Yeah.
he puts things that I like, he incorporates them into there. That was being late at night like that, watching this in the theater, not an afternoon show or anything, but late at night, and
Hmm.
watching this scene where it's supposed to be after hours and the music, that really resonated with me.
Hmm.
And then I went on to see other films that I missed, like Reservoir Dogs, and you could never listen to Steelers Wheels again after that.
Yeah.
The scene I'm talking about.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Uh,
Mad scene.
and yeah, yeah, yeah.
Even Little Green Bag, which I had never even heard before. That's what I mean. It's stuff like that he puts things. And again, like Martin Scorsese, who is great at scoring his movies and using rock and roll and things from that time period to cover Goodfellas, The Departed. He just covers all of that. Tarantino does the same thing, and it's amazing. Even Paul Thomas Anderson's got a knack for that. I think the scoring of his movies, he does a really good job. But Tarantino's just an amazing personality too. I mean, he's fun to listen to.
Yeah. And when we were talking, you were saying that Once Upon a Time in Hollywood is your favorite of his.
Yeah, yeah, it's an absolute. I mean, I think that time period in Hollywood was just a hugely influential time for movie makers, and I think he talks about this a lot. The films from the '70s are probably the most creative, other than maybe in the '30s and the '20s when Hollywood first started. I think the '70s had that new renaissance of filmmakers getting away from the studios. The studios were collapsing, and I think also with the just everything in the culture that was going on, just being able to capture all of that on film. For him to be able to turn Hollywood into 1969 without using an ounce of CGI and shutting down freeways and just filming on real film. He has a movie theater in Hollywood, the New Beverly Cinema, which he does reference in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. It was a porn theater that closed down. He bought it. He runs double features daily. He has an old-fashioned calendar. It looks like a herald, like a movie herald that has all the films that are coming out. He always runs one of his movies every month. You go there. Sometimes he's there. Sometimes there's other actors there. I went, and Clu Gulager was there, and we didn't even realize it. We took a selfie, and then we see him behind us, sitting behind us, and we're like, yeah, he's a regular here, we found out. So you don't know who you're going to see there. It's a very eclectic group of people that come to these movies. They pay $5, $10, see a double feature. I saw a James Bond double feature there. It was unbelievable. It was phenomenal.
Let's see. Now, while I say Pulp Fiction is probably my favorite of his, and followed by the Kill Bill saga,
Uh-huh.
I call it I like to think of the two of them as one, which was his
Oh, yeah.
intent originally, but
Yes.
he had to split them. What is it? The Whole Bloody Affair?
Yeah.
The
The
Whole
whole
Bloody.
Bloody Affair was what he when he did put them together and put it out, it was a limited release. I didn't get to see it. I wish I had. But and he won't release it on DVD or Blu-ray. At least he
That's
hasn't yet.
that's weird. I mean, I got lucky that I was able to see. It was a midnight show. This is going back about what could it be, 10 years ago now? Something like it was a long time. Time flies, and
It does.
a theater over here, an independent theater, I don't know if it was playing
Hmm.
Kill Bill and Kill Bill 2, 1 and 2,
Right.
together. And my girlfriend, went with me,
Hmm.
and she can't take, she doesn't like horror films, doesn't like bloody films, but she saw it and loved it. And I
Yep.
think the reason she loved it was because of the character of the bride. I think really,
Hmm.
being an independent woman and getting her revenge. She liked that aspect of it.
Hmm.
Now, I don't want you to walk out now when I say this. Please hold on to your seat. But I was a little disappointed when I first saw Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and
Hmm.
the only reason I say that is this is just to me. I've seen it twice now. I saw it twice in the theaters, and I liked it better the second time. With me, I thought, like you had said, it was a fantastic looking film that recaptures and perfectly nails the feeling of that time. You feel like that's the period. I mean, it looks
Yeah.
great.
Absolutely.
I just didn't get enough to interest me story wise, I guess. Although what they were trying to do was kind of reverse the Manson outcome.
Yeah. I mean, he was rewriting history, but it's also not really a plot-driven movie. It's a character
No,
story.
it's more of a
Playing out-
character.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, it's certainly enjoyable for me. It just wasn't. It wasn't my favorite, and the only one I really have yet to see. And I don't know how I missed it in the theater. Was Hateful Eight is the only one I haven't
Oh,
seen
yeah.
yet.
That they did a roadshow production of, on 70 millimeter, and that was unbelievable. I saw it in Ohio. We were actually away where my in-laws live, and we had to go to Cleveland. We had to drive like an hour and a half because I wasn't going to miss it, because that was a one-time thing. You don't see roadshow productions anymore. And what a roadshow is, one of those long movies with a intro and a they it has like a it stops in the middle, and there's an intermission, and then and it's playing music all through the whole thing, and he had Ennio Morricone score it. I mean, it was one of the last things he did. It's just, yeah, you got to check that out. You got to see it.
All right. Well, why don't we go back in time now?
Sure. I love
And
going back in time.
yeah, and let's start out. I found out we both were from the same general area, more or less.
Hmm.
I was in Queens, New York, growing up,
Me too.
and you too. So that's
Yeah,
it would have been great talking to you no matter where you're from. But to think that we grew up in the same area
same
is
area.
also
Yeah,
it's amazing.
we walk along the same paths, I'm sure.
Yeah, yeah, that's the thing. Isn't it crazy? You think sometimes you'd be in the same theater with somebody you didn't know them then.
Oh.
And it's the same thing with my girlfriend. Sometime, she was a what do they call it? Well, she was a guitarist. She went out and played in some wine and cheese places, and she played. And I used to go there before I ever met her. I used to go there with my friends and everything. She probably was the singer there, and I didn't know her. That was way back before I met her.
Yeah, look at that, right?
But that's how it goes. Well, all right. So going back to those early days for us, which is a great time to be a kid. Let's face it, we saw a lot of good stuff.
Hmm.
How did you first really get into the whole? Say that we'll talk about primarily the horror, monsters, sci-fi kind of genre.
Okay. That was all my dad. My father was a huge horror fanatic. His mother, my grandmother, was a huge horror fanatic, and that was funny because she was this little old lady, your atypical looking grandmother, and she loved the scarier and the gorier, the better. She took me to see Dawn of the Dead when it came out
Wow.
at the First Day movie theater, and got me in because that was one of those movies that under 17 they weren't letting anyone in. So I mean, I talked about that on one of my shows. But my dad was instrumental in the Universal Monster thing. He brought home Famous Monsters magazine. He came home, had them in his back pocket, handed them to me. I read them, tore them apart, put the pictures all over my wall. I had the T-shirts, the iron-on faces of the monsters. Pictures of me when I'm 3 and 4 years old, holding, Aurora model kits and Mego monsters and things like that when I was younger. So yeah, it was definitely him. He started me on movies in general, but it was mostly those films. And what was great about my dad is that we'd be watching a movie and he'd say, "See that guy? That's Lon Chaney. Lon Chaney was the man of 1,000 faces." And he would go off and tell me a whole story about the person. He died this way. This happened to him. That happened to him. And a lot of that stuff stuck with me. And I just would start asking him. We'd watch. Then it got into gangster films and Steve McQueen and westerns and everything. And I would just ask him, "Who is that? Didn't I see him in this?" And yeah, you did. And this is what else he was in. And so he did. He was the real drive behind it. Now, my mother was an Elvis Presley fanatic. So I got my love of the 50s rock and roll from both of them, but Elvis and the movies, that was her little bag. That was her little thing. Now, I know you're a Beatles fan. Are you an Elvis
An
fan?
Elvis fan. Yes, I'm an Elvis fan
A
as
lot of
well.
people say you can't be both. It's like you're either an Elvis fan or you're a Beatles fan.
Did you ever see that scene that was cut from Pulp Fiction
Yes,
too?
that's right.
You know what I'm talking about. Yeah, and yeah, but it's funny because I just bought. I don't have them here, but on my music channel, if you go back a few videos, you'll see I bought a whole bunch of Elvis
Yeah,
CD boxes. Yeah, and but if push comes to shove, it's a Beatles. But the thing is,
I get
but
you.
the whole thing with
I
that
love
though is
Beatles too. So that's the same thing. I had the very first Beatles album, and I loved them too because I was growing up when their music was fresh. Elvis had been already performing, and by the late '60s, he wasn't. He was still doing movies and stuff like that. But my mother was the Elvis person, and my dad, everything else. It was everything else. It was World War II movies and but the horror films were the tent pole of my life. I mean, I just love them. I love them.
bring them up right. That's
How
what I
about
say.
yeah? How about you? How'd you get started?
Well, yeah. Well, for me, this is how I remember it. Well, I remember. I'm very good with dates, old dates. I mean, I can remember everything. I have a good memory for the past. I have a great memory for what I was doing then and the dates. Now, but ask me what I did this morning or before I signed on here, and I can't remember. That's part of getting older.
Yeah.
But but when it comes to those movies, the earliest memory I have is seeing Frankenstein on television. And it's probably Creature Features in New York. You
Mhm.
had Creature Features and Chiller Theater
Or theater.
on opposite channels.
Yep.
I'm going to guess it was 1969, and the only reason I pieced these things together because back then I wasn't aware of dates then, but I got better as I got older.
Mhm.
So I would be like 7 years old, and I saw Frankenstein, and I remember vividly what stands out in my mind is for some reason the scene where they're trying to subdue the monster, and I see it in my mind still the Frankenstein monster with Dr. Frankenstein fighting over the torch.
Yep.
They're like going like that. He's trying to grab the torch or whatever.
Mhm.
That I kind of remember. But what really got to me, and this is what I always say, there are two films that really set me off for life and made me a fanatic. One of them was House of Frankenstein,
One of my
and the other one
favorites.
was one of your favorites.
Yep.
Yeah, the other one was The Mummy's Hand. Those were the two
So, yeah.
that got me. And I was so happy that, by the way, speaking of the Mummy's Hand, I got to meet Peggy Moran, who
Oh,
was in
I love Peggy Moran.
who was in there, and also when it comes to House of Frankenstein, I got to meet Elena Verdugo,
Hmm.
who was in there. So, but I remember watching House of Frankenstein in the bedroom. It was a little. We had a little 13-inch TV in the bedroom, and I was watching it. And what I remember most is that you saw Dracula's hand went over the coffin, John Carradine turning to a skeleton, and I remember the Wolfman, in there changing and at the mirror.
Yeah.
And but the clearest memory I have is that it seemed like something weird was going on to this little kid. It seemed like at the end of the movie, the Frankenstein monster was played by Glenn Strange,
Hmm.
gets off, breaks out of his straps, and he grabs a hold of the Daniel the Hunchback character and hurls him out a window.
Hmm.
And then he goes over to Boris Karloff as the mad scientist, and he helps him to his feet, and he's carrying him to safety.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking, so I said to my mother, I said, "Ma, is he a good guy or a bad guy?"
Hmm.
And she said, he's a bad guy. What is she just, she know from Frankenstein, but she just said, but I
Yeah.
remember that, and that was it. I saw those, and then of course the monster models, the Aurora models,
Hmm.
having all of those. I don't have any of them anymore. I had them several times as a kid.
Hmm. Yep. We all did, I think.
Yeah, and what memories there on Christmas Eve? I would get them,
Yeah.
put some of them under the tree, and I'd make my mom sit up. My mother and father were divorced when about that time when I was 7. But I remember my mom and I lived with my grandparents as well, and I had a sister,
Hmm.
now passed, younger sister, but we would sit there, and I'd put the models together at like 2 a.m. or something. They'd sit up with you and watch you and help you and all
Yep.
this stuff. So that's my memory of that. But yeah, well, let's talk a little bit about magazines and like
Oh,
Famous Monsters of Filmland.
that was, I think that's, I've been finding on my channel, one of my most popular videos is about famous monsters,
Yeah.
the Aurora model kits. There are so many monster kids out there, and I embrace it because I'm one of them. And I mean, I'm proud to be one. I've always been proud to be one. I've always been looked at my own self as an outsider in school, just a loner kind of by myself. And movies were my love. Movies were the things that I gravitated towards. And Famous Monsters had a lot to do with it. I mean, when I'd see these pictures in the magazines, then I'd find out, wow, Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman's actually going to be on television, but it's at 2 o'clock in the morning. Mom, can I please stay up? Can I please? I promise I'll be good. I'll be quiet. Yeah, she let me stay up. My dad would sit with me. We'd watch it. And again, we had the same kind of memories, the images, the Wolfman in the ice, melting
Mm.
slowly in the ice. And then when they'd cut away, he came out as Lon Chaney in it. And why did you free me? Why did you do this to me? And I always loved the Wolfman as a kid. I still do, but as I've gotten older, I've appreciated some of the other movies for their nuances and things that I would not have understood back then. But the Wolfman was just that tortured character that you felt bad for him. He really was a good guy, and he just got a run of bad luck, and he
Yeah, yeah.
got screwed. And for the rest of the movies, and I kind of thought House of Dracula, when they cure him, it was a little bit of a cheat because it's like, yeah, they just kind of threw that in there and said, yeah, he can have a happy.
Happy ending. And
But it's
people say
not,
this. Is how I'm sorry, I missed
No,
that,
go ahead.
Darren. What was?
No, I just said, but when I saw that, I was just like, come on. I mean, it was kind of strange.
Well, people say because I like to think that Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein is part of the series. So
It
people
is.
say to me, I have my own rationale. If you're like me, I don't know. You start making up your own rationale and answers for these things. Like they say, well, how come he was cured, and then he's the Wolfman again in Abbott and Costello Meet Frankenstein? I say because it doesn't stick. You can't cure the supernatural. He might have been able to keep a few full moons at bay
Right.
with his brain softening
Mhm.
skull softening that he did to take the pressure off the brain. But eventually,
Yeah.
that nasty old supernatural is going to come back. You're not going to cure it.
Yeah.
That's how I look at it. That's all. Simple explanation,
Mhm.
and you can enjoy that. But when you said about how you were like kind of a loner, that's how I was as a kid. I mean, I had friends, but
Mhm.
a lot of times I would rather, when I was younger, now I like to go out all the time. But when I was younger, I was like, I'd rather stay in the house and watch the movies. Like
Yep.
if they come over, hey, you want to hang out? You want to? Like, oh, I'm going to watch the movie.
Exactly.
Then I'd hang out too, play stickball and stuff.
Right.
But I was alone, and you were kind of, in a way, outcast is kind of strong, but people like kind of like didn't get it. Too many people, some people were into it, but
Yeah.
not as much as I was. I seem to
Yeah.
be more
I
into
used
the
to have
movie.
one friend back then growing up. She was a girl, and she was a tomboy all the way. She was more into sports than I was. But when it came to the monsters, she collected the same stuff I did, and Planet of the Apes too. She had all the figures like I did, and we used to play together for a while. Until it got weird as we got older that it was a girl and a guy doing it, and you just gravitated more towards boys when you're a boy, and you did that kind of thing. But I mean, again, it all boiled down to being able to see these movies on television because they were not re-released in theaters when we were kids. Television was syndicated to them. Abbott and Costello movies, all the stuff we're talking about, even Planet of the Apes. Now we got to see those, and we talked about that.
Oh yeah, we'll talk about that for the
But
benefit of
they
everybody here.
segue kind of right into from the Universal monsters because it's all that supernatural stuff and science fiction and all of it. And I loved it all. I loved the Blob as a kid, and those kind of the giant insects, Godzilla, even Godzilla movies. Even though I didn't watch them as much, I had a period, when if Famous Monsters covered it, I wanted to see it. And when I was looking through them recently, I was remembering, as I'm flipping through, and it's odd because as an adult, when you go through the magazines, you realize how many of the stories and the articles were reprinted over and over and over again.
Yeah, yeah.
Pretty strange because I know he had Forey had a heart attack in the '60s, a bad one, and it almost killed him. And I think for a period of time while he was convalescing, they were pulling stuff from the older issues,
Right.
and new issues, which I get. It's understandable. But
Yeah, that's what I'd heard. You mentioned FJA, Forrest J.
yeah,
Ackerman.
yeah.
When I saw him, Here's
Mhm.
this old at that age, this old man, this older guy, who actually collected this stuff, started a magazine, loved these films, and of course he helped us all know that it was okay to like these movies. Here's an adult that
Absolutely.
actually likes this,
Yeah.
right? And he had that great Acker mansion, his home that was decked out like yours is now, but 10 times,
Yep.
that.
Right. A huge house. Yeah. I mean, it was great.
Yeah, and how it was. What kid wouldn't like to go in there? And I never got a chance to visit
I
there.
wish I could have too. Yeah. I didn't get to
Yeah,
California until I was an adult, until much later in life.
yeah, and I've never been
Oh
to
wow! I've
California.
gone and seen a lot of the locations of films that I love. I ate breakfast at the Reservoir Dogs Diner.
Uh,
I saw Planet of the Apes stuff. I went to the Century City and saw where Conquest was filmed. My
you're
best.
kidding? Oh man, we're
Oh yeah,
gonna.
Malibu Creek. You got to go. I'm telling you, if you're an Apes fan, Malibu Creek, you can still find, props and things like that. They have all kinds of areas, and if you can. What's cool now about I'm not an electronics person. I'm not a digital person. I'm not into all this stuff, but I will give it props for being able to look at. You can bring up a movie and you can look right at the scene, and then you can stand there and you can look right at what you're looking at, and it's pretty amazing. You would have a blast if you got to go.
Oh, I'm sure. I've seen a lot of people's videos of them on the
Yeah,
beach at the end of Planet of the Apes
been
on
there,
the
done
beach.
that. Yep, all of that.
I've seen a lot, and I mean, I want to talk a lot about apes. Maybe if we meet again or something, we'll talk about apes more,
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I'm covering
deeply.
all five because Planet of the
Yeah.
Apes
Oh
now.
yeah,
So they're in
yeah,
fact, on Monday. My Beneath the Planet of the Apes episode drops. So
yeah. And the Conquest is the one I saw in the theater as a kid. At first, don't recall. I might have seen Planet of the Apes the first, but I don't recall it. But I recall seeing Conquest pretty vividly. I loved Conquest,
yeah.
and I saw Battle when it was new. Those are the two I
I
saw.
love Battle as a kid. That's my least favorite now. But again, as a kid, it was exciting. It was an exciting movie. To me,
Yeah,
Escape was the weakest as a kid because it was a lot of exposition and about
right.
okay, we're switching it. But I get it now, and I love it even more. But again, those two at the end. Now we saw an edited version of Conquest. We saw a PG, or as
Right.
then it was GP, and then even rated G. We got to get the unedited. Did you get that Blu-ray set?
Sure. I
Yeah,
got a Blu-ray player
I
just
figured
for that.
yeah, I figured you did. But I mean, that is the end all be all. I had a great time unboxing that and watching that because that
Yeah.
was really J. Lee Thompson wanted that movie to be hard. He wanted it to be harsh, and it was great. I thought it was terrific.
Yeah, yeah. I'd like to do at some point, maybe down the line, talking more about each film and series, everyone specifically. But I would say also, Escape was one when I was growing up. To me, it was like, there's not a lot of apes in it.
Mhm.
Yeah, kind of silly. It wasn't it was my least favorite. Now, I think it's probably cinematically speaking, as a film, it's probably the best sequel probably, in my opinion, after the first one. But my big favorite, by by far, growing up, was Beneath the Planet of the Apes.
Same here.
When I saw that on TV, Darren, oh man, it was so cool going underground,
Uh huh.
like a
And it's
comic book
cool
come to
because
life.
he's in Queens, and you see Queensboro Plaza, and you see all these places that you might have actually seen growing up as a kid. And
Yeah,
I love James Franciscus's performance in that movie. I think, and I know it's overdone, and I know it's over,
no,
but I
it
get
has to be. It has to be. How else could you act scenes like that?
exactly.
I think it's great. I mean, people today a lot of young people maybe say, "Oh, that's so hammy or whatever." What else? The guy's in pain, man. He's like,
And
how
he's
much are you gonna do?
confused. I mean, imagine what that must be like. He's going after Taylor, and he's going through that same trajectory. What do they call it, the Hassline curve or whatever? He
Yeah,
follows that same thing and winds up in the same place. That's amazing in itself. And then just the crew dies. He's by himself, and he happens to come upon Nova. And I look. You got the Planet of the Apes, and I talk about this. Beneath the Planet of the Apes just destroys everything. Imagine being a studio executive for 20th Century Fox after Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and we got to come up with a sequel. How do you do that?
brilliant.
You sit there and you go, we just destroyed the Earth. What are we going to do? And then they come up with this idea to go back and put the apes in our place. And now that's a great idea. Now, as a kid, again, yeah, we were probably a little bored because it is a little slow moving, and it's more of a reverse of what we were seeing, and it's more fun to see the other. But it sets up conquest and battle, and those are terrific.
Well, I could get into this at some later time. You won't believe the time I've spent over my life as a geek fan of these movies,
Mm-hmm.
figuring out timelines. There's all kinds of theories now.
Yeah.
These days, like I will go ape, so to speak. I'll every couple of years I'll watch all five movies or something.
Yeah.
And these days, believe me, as much as I recognize Planet of the Apes as the first one as a true classic and the best, I guess, right? I'm just a little overdosed on that one. I kind of like to get to the other ones. It's like, yeah, let's get past Planet and now let's. And I like when they go back. And although the intent was originally, I believe, by Paul Dane to make these stories so that they would tie into the first Planet of the Apes
Mm-hmm.
and how it came. They really don't fit, especially now that time has passed and 1991 is come and gone and there's no ape management center running around. So I look at it now as alternate timelines. Like by Zero and Cornelius going back, this is a different 1991.
Mm-hmm.
This is a different future. It's not ours. Not the same one we had now. With our run. That way I can say it doesn't necessarily lead to the first movie. That's the question they leave you hanging with.
Right.
At the end of battle. Is it going to turn into that?
It's a circular storyline and it takes you back. They never prove it. They never say that. And I mean, there's no other way to go with it other than whatever your opinion is when you see it. But I like to think that because that's what I went with as a kid. And I thought it was brilliant. I thought it was a brilliant thing. You didn't see, other than the TV show, The Twilight Zone, where you'd see this kind of stuff all the time. And again, Rod Serling had a lot to do with Planet of the Apes. I mean, it lends itself to that, science fiction. And until Star Wars came out, Planet of the Apes was just the best thing going. I mean, for us growing up. Now, I love Star Wars. I do. But Planet of the Apes is always going to hold a special place in my heart because I was a kid when I saw it. And just like kids today who are going to see Harry Potter and things like that, my son, Harry Potter was the thing. That was every year the new one was coming out. He went crazy for it.
That's my girlfriend. She's a Harry Potter fanatic. It's on the TV all the time. But you mentioned two words, Star Wars. For me,
no,
because of what you said.
Yeah.
All of a sudden, overnight, Planet of the Apes disappeared. There was the Marvel magazine that came out, Planet of the Apes,
right.
And then Star Wars was such a sensation. All of a sudden, and it used to be Famous Monsters of Filmland. Then it became Star Wars, and then a little tiny like, Famous Monsters of Filmland.
Yep, you're right.
It took over.
And that was a huge marketing bonanza. I mean, it unlike we've ever seen, before or since. Even with things like the Avengers today and the Marvel movies, it's not the same. Star Wars was its own entity that started from George Lucas, and it blew up, and it became. I mean, again, I loved it. I loved the first three films. I think, again, the 70s were the time to be a kid and go see these movies. And once Jaws came out, Planet of the Apes for me was kind of I was over it. I was on to the next thing, and Jaws was the thing. And it was the favorite movie until Star Wars came out. And then for a while, Star Wars was the thing. And then Superman came out, and that was amazing. And it was just all those things. But Star Wars kicks off the whole space exploitation thing. You get all those crazy Battlestar Galactica. Even the lower budget things like Star Crash. And I love Carolyn Monroe as much as the next guy, but it's hard to watch that movie.
No, well, it became a phenomenon and still is, Star Wars, and I was kind of jealous. I was jealous that my beloved apes got replaced, And but I didn't really give it at the time. I really wasn't really too sold on it, but after that, I've seen them all, and I do think they're good movies. I mean, the first three, as you said, especially, I do enjoy them. Probably like the second the best, probably.
Yeah, me too. Empire Strikes Back definitely was my favorite.
Yeah.
But once again, because it's dark. And it's the same with Beneath the Planet of the Apes. In the 70s, there were a lot of nihilistic and depressing endings to movies. Taxi Driver didn't have a great ending. It was a sad kind of thing. All these movies that were done back then, a lot of depressing people getting killed at the last minute. If you ever see Crown International stuff, that's like AIP's stepchild. and they're on a lower budget, but they made certain movies, The Teacher, Trip with the Teacher, The Stepmother, Sister-in-Law, all these movies where they start off as this one kind of movie where you think, oh, this is going this way, and then all of a sudden it does this 360 and shit happens, and it's like, wow, where did that come from? And it's imaginative, and that's what I like about them. I like that stuff.
I grew up seeing movies in the theater like around 71, like Willard. I love Willard. I got beautiful child memories of seeing that. Felt so sorry for Socrates when he was finished off by Ernest Borgnine.
That was great. Great movie. That kicks off the echo horror thing.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
More with, Jaws pushed it into an aquatic thing, but you had movies like Frogs. I love Frogs. You ever see Frogs with Sam Elliott?
Yeah. It's
Empire of the Ants. All of those. Food of the Gods.
Food of the Gods. That's a hoot. I watched that again not too long ago.
The special effects are crap, but Rick Baker worked on that movie.
I remember Squirm with the worms.
Worms.
Yeah. So I love all these categories.
Subgenres of movies.
Subgenres and everything.
You can put them even further down. There's blaxploitation films, and then there's blaxploitation horror films. There's a whole slew of, they covered pretty much every film other than a werewolf. Well, even still with that movie, The Beast Must Die, kind of has that.
Yeah. That's a little weak, I thought, if I remember. I've seen it in a while. But, I love Blackula. I think Blackula has its moments. It's scary. That woman runs down the hallway when she comes out, when she defrosts.
Yeah, and then they carried that over with Count Yorga, with Robert Quarry's Count Yorga the Vampire, with him running down the hall, really slow motion. And it's just imaginative stuff, especially in the horror and science fiction genre back then.
Now, the Planet of the Apes films, of course, they had this thing where they were in the theater. They had a thing called Go Ape.
Yep. Had the poster a long time ago. I still don't know what happened to it.
It's funny. I had the poster with the Uncle Sam.
Yeah.
20th Century Fox wants you to go ape.
With all 5 Planet of the Apes films.
Yeah, I had one, and it cost me $5 at the time. I got it for, which I thought was a lot then. Yeah. And my cousin, who I haven't seen in a long time, we made it. I traded him the poster for something once, and I've regretted it ever since.
At least you know where it went. Mine, I had it. It didn't get torn. A lot of times I would put them up with thumbtacks, which is a definite no-no. And I would tear it down, and if it ripped, I threw it away. I remember I don't even want to talk about it because it's depressing.
Well, although I'm a person.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm a person who can't, you don't know me yet, but I can't stand today. I like yesterday. So I like the older days. So, the movies, they don't make them like that anymore.
I totally agree with you. I think a lot of filmmakers understand this even today, that we're hurting today with film, and people are going to start to lose that experience of seeing a movie in a theater and really enjoying that group experience of going to a theater for the first time and seeing a movie for the first time.
You're not kidding. I still got memories, I'm sure you do, of the head coming out of the boat in Jaws.
Oh, yeah.
And the reaction to the audience. Nothing beats a good, respectable, I guess, audience, an audience that is into it and is not, behaved. Just everybody's enjoying it together. Nothing beats that.
Nope.
And it's not quite the same anymore. I find more when I see movies now in theaters, which isn't often anymore, but when I do, I find there's more interruptions and people talking than there was then.
On their phones, and yeah, I know. And what's interesting? It's a double-edged sword, because if I could go back, you would lose all the DVDs, you would lose all of the chances to see things. But what people don't understand today, I tell my son this all the time, you had to wait for something to come on syndicated television. And when it came on syndicated television, now I just want to talk Planet of the Apes. Remember the 4:30 movie?
Absolutely.
Now
they were cut to ribbons.
Now they only had 5 days. Now they put Planet of the Apes on as two days, so because they didn't want to cut anything. So one sequel had to be missing. So it would be Planet Part 1 on Monday, Planet Part 2 on Tuesday. Then Wednesday would be Beneath, maybe, and then maybe Escape or Conquest, and you'd miss one. So you had to wait almost a year before it would come back on again. Yeah. And people don't realize that. Now, even in theaters, a movie played in a theater, if it did really well, it would get a second release. It would get a release, and it would get a new poster, and it would get, some more ballyhoo, and they would push it to the smaller theaters, the second run houses, and you'd get to see it again. And if you really liked that movie, you were there. you went and you saw it again. They don't do that anymore.
Yeah. Could you imagine? I mean, I had the Castle films. I had the silent movies on the projector. 10 minute.
Again, my dad, same thing. We bought a whole bunch of them when we were at that convention, that Famous Monsters for the 2 years.
Yeah, and they were very. It's the only way you could watch things. You didn't have VHS tapes yet. You didn't have DVDs or anything.
No,
It blows my mind to think what I would have thought, say in 1975 or 1976, if there was such a thing as DVD,
yeah, you
right?
can only.
Blu-ray.
And again, remember when VHS first came out? In order to buy a movie like Jaws, it was $89.95.
Mm.
First came out. Then, as they wanted to start pushing it, they became affordable. But in a way, it killed a lot of it, because now, again, you can stream stuff on the internet. You can, I hear a lot of people say, I don't even want my DVDs anymore because I can get anything I want. And I like just like a book. I want to read a book. I want the book in my hand. I don't want to look on a screen and read.
No. I'm a physical media guy all the way.
Me too. Records. I still have records.
Yep.
I'm not as big of a collector as you are with all of it. I collect movie soundtracks on LP, but I do have a regular record player like I used to, and I still buy that stuff. That's
all right. Darren, one thing I wanted to cover before I forget. One more thing about Planet of the Apes. Just one thing. We talked about how we saw all 5 films in the theaters together in one shot, and the Go Ape thing. And then we found out off camera when we were meeting here that the two of us saw it at the Cross Bay Theater in Queens, the same theater, so we might have been in there together, right?
Possible.
And here's what I wanted to ask you. What I remember about it is that 2 things. Number one, they were shown out of sequence when I saw them. I don't know. Maybe it wasn't the same day. Maybe it wasn't the same time. Maybe it was a different year even. I don't know. But when I went, for sure, I went like twice. And both times they showed them out of order. Like it would start, it was ridiculous. Like it would start maybe with Conquest, then it would go to Beneath, then you would, et cetera, et cetera. And I never got to see Battle because they must have saved Battle for last when I went both times.
Mm-hmm.
And Planet of the Apes, the 2 times I went, Planet of the Apes would get up to the middle. They always showed Planet of the Apes 4th when I went. The first 3 were always like a mixture of Escape, Beneath, and Conquest, but in different orders. They never were right.
Oh, that's interesting.
And then when Planet of the Apes was shown, without fail, the woman with the flashlight would come. It was getting to be around 6 o'clock, and they would say, "You have to go." Mm-hmm. And this was in the Cross Bay Theater, so I'm saying maybe it was a different year. I don't know, or if you were with an adult or something. Maybe I wasn't with an adult.
My mom to see it both times. I did it twice, and I saw it both times, but I saw them in order. They were in order.
Yeah. I don't know what. Can you know what year it was?
No, I was trying to figure that out. I think that whole thing started in either late 73 or 74, which would put me at about 9 years old, 8 or 9 years old, and. I'm not sure. I know I went I had to have gone to see it when it came out soon, because I know it was heavily promoted on television. I remember the commercials for it. So I'm sure I bugged my parents.
Yeah, okay. What I'm betting you went to see it when it first was done.
Yeah.
By the time I saw it, I'm sure it was sometime later, maybe 76 or something.
Because again, these things stayed out in theaters for a while.
Because this was maybe another time they were doing it in 76, maybe 5, but I think more like 76. By that time, I had them all recorded on audio tape off the television set. And I had them etched into my brain, the audio. And I wanted to see some of them were cut.
Yeah.
I was glad to be able to see them. But yeah, they didn't let the kids stay past 6 if you weren't unaccompanied by an adult. So I saw basically, which Beneath was my favorite, and Conquest, so I was happy. I got to see Beneath and Conquest and Escape, and then half a planet, and they would take you out of there. So, but that's my memory of that.
When you rigid and strict theater, I know that. I do remember not being able to get in without a parent.
I'll bring up something with that. One of my favorite double bills of all time was Westworld and Soylent Green.
Wow.
I'm a Charlton Heston fan, and he's in Soylent Green, big time. And I saw those at the Cross Bay when they came out. A friend's dad he had 2 sons and myself, the 3 of us. He brought us to see it, and I forget it. Fanatical over Westworld. It's still one of my all-time favorite films.
great.
Yeah, the original Terminator is some people call it now.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the strict business because
Hmm.
back then, my cousin and I wanted to see it, and we went there. We were about 12 at the time, and we couldn't get in without it. Adult, we even tried doing the thing at the front where we said to we see some man or something. Excuse me, sir, can you
You get a
bring
sense.
us in?
Yeah.
Like
Then
buying a Playboy magazine or something. Can you let us in?
yeah.
And she said, "I know." And she knew she knew that she knew us before, so she wouldn't let us in. It took forever. Somehow, I don't know how I ever got in to see it again, but somehow I got in. But it was like they would not like today, where you got kids can see R-rated movies. I sound like the old man, but R-rated movies, X-rated
Mhm.
movies, just on the computer, the phone. You don't even have to go to the
Yeah,
theater.
you don't even have to go out, right?
So
Well, I mean that theater in particular, I remember being strict. Now, the Haven Theater, the one nearest to me, that was even closer. They didn't care. I mean, they like I said, I
mm,
stayed and saw Jaws all through the one day, and nobody bothered me. Nobody said get out. Nobody, they didn't. They were a second run house. The Cross Bay wasn't. I think the Cross Bay ran movies pretty close to when they first came out. I remember when Rocky 3 played there, it was a big deal. I went to see it. And I didn't have a problem getting in then, but by then I was older, so but in the early days it was rough to try to go to a movie by yourself.
yeah. Um, you mentioned in between all this Godzilla. Of course, I grew up with the Godzilla films. I love the Godzilla films,
Mhm.
but I like give me a guy in a suit any day over CGI. That's me. I don't know how you feel.
No, I don't like CGI at all.
I haven't watched this yet. I just got this for real cheap. Godzilla versus Kong.
Mhm.
Now I love the old King Kong versus Godzilla. That's my favorite Kong. I
Yeah.
don't care how cheesy and stupid it looks with that suit. I
Mhm.
grew up with that movie 100 times,
Yeah.
and I love King Kong versus Godzilla. I'm
But,
gonna give this a whirl though. You know,
chucking styrofoam boulders.
yeah, yeah. And he comes up from the ocean
Yeah, it's
like,
great though. It's imaginative. That's what I mean. The CGI, when you can do anything you want and make out. All I've been hearing about is the new Ant-Man movie and how it's all CGI, and a lot of people hate it. A lot of people are not happy with it, and that's what we need. We need enough people to turn around and say stop, and just stop going, and then maybe they'll realize, hey, we need to do something different. But I don't know if you can come back from this.
no, I don't think I don't mind. I call it cartoons. People get very angry. It's not cartoons. It's not a cartoons.
No.
But to me, I call it a cartoon sarcastically. Yeah, some of the things just I know when it's on, it's like drawn onto the screen. If you're
Mhm.
watching, like I didn't like the Peter Jackson King Kong. I just didn't care for that. And when you saw like that stampede of dinosaurs
Yeah.
and the guys are running, looking back, you can see it's all
Yeah,
cartoon.
you can
It's like a
tell.
cartoon.
You can tell. Yeah. I mean,
You know?
Peter Jackson's heart was in the right place. He was a big fan of King Kong.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, it's inferior to. I mean, even the '76 King Kong has some imaginative stuff to it because they tried. I mean, the film doesn't really hold up well, but
It's funny
it
about
doesn't
that
like to
film.
look at Jessica Lange though. I mean,
Yes, yes. When as a kid in Famous Monsters, when that issue came out, I was like, oh wow. That's
wow,
how I knew I was coming around. I was what I was interested in.
yeah,
And I was starting to come around. Forget the monsters. Who's what's this? And then I went to see it, and I was 14 or so, and I was like, I was so angry. I was like, oh, sacrilege, sacrilege!
yeah.
What a jokey film and all. But I'll tell you, I'd rather watch that now over the new stuff.
That's what I mean. That's what I'm saying. A lot of these movies, as silly as they were, again, they had to come up with a way to do these things, and look at the matte paintings in Beneath the Planet of the Apes, for example. I mean, how
Right.
amazing they are. The radiation destroyed cities and the stuff underground. That's all painted, and
Yeah.
that's artistry. That's what we don't have now because everything is done on a computer, and I find it's not the same.
I don't mind certain things being done on the computer, like adding a little bit of a building. Or there was a thing I saw with one of the
Being taken out of the story to see what you're seeing and saying that looks fake, then it's okay. Lord of the Rings wouldn't have been able to have been made without a thing. And I mean, those are phenomenal stories, but it's gotten to a point now where they're heavily relying on it for everything. And
well, I watched the first I wouldn't even get into the Marvel movies. I can't watch them. I can't deal with them. But the first one of the first the Tobey Maguire one, the first Spider-Man movie
Sam
that
Raimi Spider-Man's.
yeah, Sam Raimi that I had seen. Like I was okay with like Spider-Man swinging around the city CG effects. I was fine with that.
Because
But then
again,
when I saw a scene where Tobey Maguire was jumping over, like he was supposed to, hey, he's got his superpowers and he's leaping over the buildings, and it's all a cartoon. Hey, he's leaping over the
yeah,
buildings. I'm like, no, don't do that. Or Spider-Man fighting somebody on the street, and it's CGI flipping around and stuff.
yeah.
That bothers me.
Hmm.
You know.
Again, because it's taking you out of the story and it's putting you into the thing of a technical end where you're like, I don't think this looks right. And that's where once that happens, now again, in the cheesy movies we saw, we knew they weren't, but you
No.
knew what you were getting when you saw it and you wanted to see what they were going to show. Now, again, a lot of times with those movies, you had just stuff that crazy stuff would happen and you just would be like, oh my God, I can't believe I just saw this,
Mm.
giant chickens and things like that.
And in those Japanese Toho movies, but
Yeah,
cheesy and corny and silly looking those some of those monsters were. They're actors.
yeah,
At least they're. I rather have phony cities,
yeah,
cardboard cities, and have the monsters real. But you know,
yeah,
that's how I
exactly.
feel about that. Before we get on to Jaws, because I like to discuss Jaws a little bit here,
Sure.
for sure. But one of the movies I don't know how you feel about it that really is a favorite. It's another Charlton Heston movie. Maybe you know where I'm going with it. When I was 9 years old, I went into the movie theater with some friends to see this. They said, my memory of this is some adults were driving a bunch of us kids, cousins, to go see a movie. They were going to drop us off at the movies. And I can still remember, I said, what's the name of the movie? And the way you speak in New York or whatever, a lot of times, she goes, The Amiga Man. And I'm thinking, Amiga. Like I'm thinking Amigo. I'm thinking it might be a Western, The Amiga Man. What the
Yeah.
heck is that? I didn't know what that was going to be. And I loved horror and science fiction. So we get there, and the movie had started already.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing I see is Charlton Heston pulling up to his garage, and a mutant jumps into the back of the car,
Yeah.
and takes off, careens into the wall, jumps up with the gun,
Yeah.
blood splattered on the wall. What a great for a 9-year-old! That was the coolest thing
Yeah.
ever.
Yep.
And yeah, so the Omega Man is like one of my all-time favorite movies of all time. But you have a feeling on that one, or?
Oh yeah, I love the Omega Man. I'm a big Charlton Heston fan too. The interesting thing, my best friend's favorite actor when we were growing up was Charlton Heston. My favorite actor growing up was Robert Shaw because I thought Robert Shaw in Jaws did such an amazing job that he blew me away, and I couldn't get that performance out of my head. Now I loved all three of them in the movie, and I'll get to that. But Charlton Heston was big for me too because of Planet of the Apes. So anything that he did, science fiction wise, especially, was tops with me. And the Omega Man I like even better than Soylent Green, even though now I think the Omega Man's effects are a little bit wanting compared to the storyline of Soylent Green, but I love them both. I think
Well, the problem I have with the Omega Man, if anything, I mean, first of all, it's got nostalgia warmth all over it for me,
oh
so I'm good with it. But I love the soundtrack. Some people hate the soundtrack of
mhm.
the Omega Man. It doesn't fit or whatever. I mean, that's fine. It's my favorite soundtrack. And I'm glad it came out on a vinyl album and a CD.
Yep.
Ron Grainer? Yeah, I'm trying to remember. Sometimes you can't remember names when you need them. Ron
No,
Grainer.
happens to me all the time.
So yeah, that's a. I feel like there was something else I was going to tie this into, but it's slipping my mind again. The short term thing, Omega Man.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely a big thing. And then Charlton Heston. I mean, I went on to love other stuff by him too. The Airport 75, The Ten Commandments.
Mm-hmm.
For me personally, I haven't seen every movie ever made, obviously, but for me, Ben Hur is to me my choice for the best movie ever made. I mean, that's I just love the movie as a spectacle, as an
Yeah.
epic.
Yeah, it's an epic.
So yeah, so I go beyond the sci-fi Heston, but that's what started me, on
Right.
Heston
Right.
was,
Exactly. Exactly.
was that. All right, so here it is. Let's we're talking about all these movies of the '70s and such, and now the biggie, right? Jaws. Oh wow, I mean, what can you say? I was 13 when it came out, and
Mhm.
good age for it. You're a few years younger than me, I
Yeah,
believe.
I'm a few
So
years younger. It was again, I would have been about 9 or 10 when it came out, and yeah, I bugged my. Again, you see the commercial. You know that I forgot the guy's name who does the narration, but his voice is very deep.
mm,
And he's like, There's a creature alive. And it's very like you're ominous. And immediately my head turned around. I'm watching this and I'm like, oh, and I had heard about the book. I had not read the book. The book is not really that good, actually. But I mean, the adaptation of the book to the movie is much, it's just like The Godfather. The book is decent, but the movie is much better. Much
Yeah,
better.
I think I read the book after the movie. Yeah.
Me too. Me too. But I mean, I got hooked on it. Jaws was a phenomenon for me, changed my life. I've heard many people talk about this. There are tons of Jaws fans out there. I've met many of them. And it is one of those movies that just makes you think of things completely differently. I mean, I wanted to be on the ocean. I wanted to shark fish. I wanted to be out there. I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to go see where it was filmed. I wanted, just learn about it. I bought the Jaws log. I bought the making of the movie Jaws. I got all those paperbacks. I was really into it. And went to see it as many times as I possibly could. I mean, any allowance money I had in my pocket, if the movie was playing even within a radius of any, we had a lot of theaters back then. Unfortunately, now in that area, there are none. There are no theaters. But back then, they were everywhere. And if Jaws was playing, I was there. I went to see it. Any free minute I had. And I tried to learn the lines. I bought the script. I bought the poster. I got everything. That was what started me collecting, really. I mean, my dad gave me FMs, Famous Monsters, other monster magazines and things like that. Got me started. But Jaws was just a phenomenon. And people out of the water.
Yeah, I was going to say, you were saying, oh, maybe you want to go on the water, or maybe you want to do that. So you're the only one I know that ever said made you want
to. Now, we went to Rockaway Beach. That was our vacation.
That's where we went.
Rockaway Beach we never traveled. My mother never wanted to go anywhere. Other than Graceland, my mother never had a destination outside of New York. So our vacations were summers. My dad would take a week off, and for 2 or 3 days, we'd go to Rockaway. I'd never go in the water that year because of Jaws.
Oh, yeah.
In the water. I mean, we looked. You see out on the boardwalk. There was nobody out there.
And I'm like you. I saw it as a kid. I don't know how many. I saw it as often as I could. I must have seen it, 5 or 6 times that period.
Yeah.
With different cousins and
me too.
People.
Driving at the sunrise over by Valley Stream. I went there.
Yeah, I didn't see it. I know I was there, but I saw Jaws 2 there.
Oh, okay.
I didn't see Jaws at the drive-in,
but
I saw Jaws too. But
drive-in experiences actually was that. I mean, I don't think I've done very many since.
Yeah, this is a movie. It's got to be seen on the big screen. I went back to see it again. I used to have a thing where they bring something back to the theater before VHS. They would say, I forget what year it was. Maybe it was 78 or something. They brought Jaws back.
Yes.
To the theater, or 77 or 78.
79, actually, because that's the poster that I have.
79, okay. Yeah.
Wait, my finger's going. Well, that way. There it is.
Okay. And but let's stay with Jaws. But since you mentioned the drive-in, I'm just going to go on a tangent here. We'll get back to Jaws, but first I will do the sequels, even though we haven't talked about the first one yet. Jaws 2, I saw it. I guess by that time I was like 16 or something like that, and saw that at a drive-in, and it was like the longest line on Sunrise Highway you could ever remember. It stretched on forever, and I was coming from Queens back then, so it was a long line. And I got to tell you, I really didn't like it when I first saw it at all, And funny, these days, what I like about it is what I wouldn't have appreciated as a younger person, and that is, I like Roy Scheider's plight, what he has to deal with, losing his job, and people don't believe him. He thinks he's half nuts and all this kind of stuff, and all the personal demons he's got to deal with. That's what I like. The other stuff to me is like some slasher film. Take a bunch of annoying teenagers, throw them in the water, and have a shark. I hated that. I really wish Richard Dreyfuss would have come back, but I think it's because he was doing Close Encounters with Spielberg, I believe.
And, again, he wasn't. I don't think he'd have come back even if he could have. But it's one of those things where, as a kid, I appreciated it because it was connected. I didn't understand how another shark could show up at the same place, how the mayor and the town wouldn't appreciate the problem and say, well, maybe we do have another problem, instead of just blowing it off and saying, you're crazy, you're fired. But as an adult, I understand it a little bit better. I have a deeper appreciation for Jaws 2 as an adult than I did as a kid.
Same here. I appreciate it more as an adult.
Mm-hmm.
3, I went to see the 3D one in the theater. I had this
3D
ridiculous job.
craze. Remember that the Friday the
3D
13th.
craze Friday the third. Well, I'm
Yeah,
going to try to get that in before we get off too. Yeah, the 3D craze. They had Friday the 13th in part 3 in 3D. They had Amityville Possession in
yep.
3D.
Coming at you. Remember that movie? Coming at you. It was like an
Coming
action.
at you just for 3D. Yeah,
Yep.
and they brought a lot of stuff back. I think I saw Andy Warhol's Frankenstein in the theater. House of Wax was brought into back into
Yep.
the
Yep.
theater,
Yep.
and all this stuff. But I thought it was terrible. I thought Bess Armstrong is. I always say Bess Armstrong is adorable in the movie, but for the rest of it, I can't. I
Yeah.
just can't take the movie. And then the fourth one, actually, I'll get your reaction to these two, and I don't want to do all the talking on them. But the Jaws: The Revenge, I don't really care for much either. But believe it or not, these days I'll take Revenge over the first one, the third one.
The third one.
I don't know. I'll take it over it, but they're both kind of weak. And your opinion?
They're both weak, and to me, Jaws 4 is a travesty. The fact that this shark chases Ellen Brody to where is it, the Bahamas? I think I've only seen
Yeah.
it. I should watch it again or whatever, but it's so hard to do. I mean, it's another thing. It's a cash cow. It's one of those things. Once a studio finds something that's working, they keep putting it. They beat a dead horse into the ground, and if they're not doing an imaginative thing, and really got creative people on these movies, then it's really tough to watch.
Yeah, they could have done better stories. The thing one of the times when I watched Revenge, what I did was I started thinking, and it's been a long time since I've seen it, but one of the times I saw it again, I said to myself, if you really think about it, this thing about the shark pursuing her is in her own mind almost. Like it's
Mhm.
almost like it's
It
not
should
it's
be,
not
yeah,
really thinking of her.
yeah. It can't
But
be, and that's what. How do
you
they
know,
swallow that?
I think it was the intent. But
Oh,
but what I'm doing is again playing rationalizing something to make fit me better, and I really think it can be watched as if like she's so first my husband, then my son, and now I'm going. It's another one. What is it? My what's going on here? She's like so shark crazy.
yeah.
That's what I'm thinking. But hearing Spot from the Munsters as the roar of this shark. When the
Mhm.
shark actually roars, I think it's Spot from Universal Stock
Yeah.
under the stairs
Yep.
doesn't
Yeah. I
doesn't
know.
help
It's just
matters.
I mean, they're bad, but again, Jaws 2, at least has some of the cast. It would have been great to have Dreyfus back. I think it would have bumped it a lot, and it would have made it a better film because that woman that shows up doesn't believe him either. The one where she's measuring bites on the orc or whatever,
Yeah.
and she's kind of the ichthyologist character now. Yeah, you can't.
I love the line in there too. When I'm going to see if I get it right. It'll be tough. Where he said, "I think a great white did this." He's saying, and she goes, "A Carcarian, Carcaris, whatever the name."
Yeah,
Like she has to say the name of it. He
yeah,
says, "Like I think a great white did this." She can say, You believe a great white did this?" She has to say like the name of the shark, this
uh-huh.
complicated name of it. But I forget what it's called. But yeah, now you had told me that you, as I did, but I think you met more. You met people from Jaws. You got to meet a lot of the celebrities from Jaws, right?
Yeah. I actually saw Roy Scheider in the city when I worked. I worked in Midtown Manhattan in security and facilities, and I would go to lunch. And I walked by one day, and I walked past this restaurant, and I saw him, and I backed up, and I looked again, and I made sure it was him, and I wanted to go in there, but he was eating with his wife, and I was like,
Oh yeah,
in New York City, it's you don't screw around with celebrities. I mean, you see them on the street, you give them a look. Sometimes you do a double take and they smile or you wave, but that's it. You don't approach them, unless you're working and they come in. Now, I had that opportunity, not with Roy Scheider, but with many other actors and actresses when I worked at, it was actually the Money Building. The company is no longer around anymore. It was a life insurance company. They insured the very first American Indian. And they were right in the middle of Broadway. And I mean, we had a movie company called Corsair Pictures. They did a few movies, Little Miss Firecracker or Miss Firecracker with Holly Hunter and Shock to the System with Michael Caine and Swoosie Kurtz. So all of these people would come in. Brooke Shields. There was a law firm up there that had a lot of stars. James Coburn, I met there. I met Susan Sarandon. A lot of people, just like you, have met stars. But this was during my job, so it was hard to have a conversation with people. I'd
sure.
get a couple of minutes to say hello. Roy Scheider, I walked by, saw him. I got to see him. I regret not going in, but at the same time, I'm glad that I did, because I would have hated if he had said, "Get the hell out of my face."
Oh well,
And
yeah. I've had a few experiences like that. You get a
mhm,
chance you take. Now I have to tell you, we'll go back and forth with this with the actors.
sure.
I did get to see. I don't. I like to say meet. I didn't talk to him or anything, but I did get his autograph, Roy
Uh-huh.
Scheider. And the way this was, from my memory, is the early '90s. Sometime he was doing something on at NBC or something. Some talk. Maybe it was talking about Jaws or something. He was appearing, and when I would find out that somebody would be on the program, I would go down to the NBC building and I would wait, and they come out of the elevator or something. And sure enough, after the interview, Roy Scheider came out. There was about 4 or 5 of us there. There weren't a lot of people there. I didn't get to speak to him or anything, but I did say, may I have your autograph? Sure. A beautiful signature I got.
Nice.
But what I had, I don't understand me sometimes. When I look back at some of the things I've got signed, I don't understand it. In this case, I got I think I was going to that place we talked about, Jerry Ollinger's
Hmm.
movie material store or whatever, the stills. And I think I got the best 8x10 I could get was from 52 pickup. It was a nice shot of Roy, a close up of him, and that's what he signed. But it's a beautiful signature. It's beautiful.
Hey, I
I
mean,
too
at
bad.
least you got the signature. I've done similar things. I met Michael Bain, and I was so enamored of my best friend was there. I was there. My son was there. My son got Aliens. My best friend got Tombstone, and I was going to get Terminator, and I changed my mind at the last minute and said, Planet Terror, you got to sign, because this is great. It's Robert Rodriguez, and I was into it at the time. And
Yeah,
now I'm like, why the hell didn't I get the Terminator? That's crazy. He did all these
yeah.
cool lines from the movie on the signatures, and I got like just Michael Bain. But I
I
met Richard Dreyfuss at Chiller. I waited.
Yeah, me too. But before we get to that, based on something you said, yeah, on that along those lines, Al Pacino, I got to see him, meet him, and that was great. I got a photo with him in the
That's
city.
that's very
I just lucked out because I had a period in the early '90s where I used to go just to hang out at certain hotels, is what you did, and when they would come out, and or NBC studios or something like that, and
mhm,
people there would share information, some wouldn't. They would. I wasn't a dealer, I never was. So the dealers were only concerned with making money.
right.
They didn't want to like give you any tips, take their money. So one guy said, "Did you get Al Pacino yet?" I said, "No." He said, "He's at City Hall. He's doing a movie called City Hall, which
I remember.
turned out." So John Cusack was there,
Mhm.
and it was the most amazing thing. I got some great photos. Al Pacino had a trailer in the street, and he had to come out of the trailer with John Cusack and cross the street and walk across City Hall's grounds to
Mhm.
get to City Hall, the building. And while he was doing that, he's like playing football with. He's saying, "Go long." I don't know if I hate football. I don't even know football, but he's going, "Go long, John, go long," and he goes back and he's throwing the football, and then people like, and he's so used to it, and he's so cool.
Yeah.
He said about harassing people, right? It's in the
Yeah.
city. He was like, "Oh, sure." He's like, "Here you go, John." He's trying to some girl. Can I have a picture now? Yeah, sure. Okay, John. Here you go. Take another shot. Then there's a moment in between passes. Can I have a photo? Sure. Sign the autograph. What picture of all the things Al Pacino does? What picture did I find?
I'm,
You can't even get
I
what
was going to say I can't even venture a guess.
Frankie and Johnny.
Frankie and Johnny, Michelle
This
Pfeiffer.
movie, instead of it being like Scarface or Dog Day
Godfather.
Afternoon or any one of another
Yeah.
Godfather or anything, I wind up getting. He's smiling and he's wearing like the cook's white coat.
Right. Yeah.
Anyway, he signed and he's got a weird signature, just a circle. Looks like almost like a what's the ampersand? Is that what that? No, not an
Yeah.
ampersand.
Yeah. The anything.
At
Yeah. Yeah.
at.com. Like that's what it looks like. Anyway, that's a tangent. Now you're telling me
Yeah, but
I
what's
also
interesting about that
Richard Dreyfuss.
real quick,
Yeah.
is that you got the stories though, which is great. You
Oh,
got
beautiful
the
story.
signatures, and that's great too. But you've got the stories to go with it, and that's what I love. I love the stories. Now, Dreyfus was totally drunk when I met him. All three of
I,
us waited in line. I don't think he signed three separate Jaws pictures, and all three of them, the signatures look different. One of them is R Dreyfus, one of them is he said wrote high. I think he did not want to be there. So it
yeah.
wasn't one of those where I built it up in my head. This is Matt Hooper. I got so many questions. I want to talk to him. You don't get that kind of time at Chiller unless
Yeah.
you're talking to a star that nobody really cares that much about. and you get there, and I've had stars pull me over and say, "Oh, come over and talk to me," and I have a conversation with them, and it was great. And but Dreyfuss was not one of them. But at that same time, I mean, when he died, I've met Susan Backlany many times, 3 or 4 times actually. Carl Gottlieb, the guy who wrote it, and he was Meadows, and he had to keep cutting his part down. He's the editor of Town Paper. I never met Murray Hamilton, unfortunately, or Lorraine Gary. Lorraine Gary is one of those people that when she retired after Jaws, The Revenge, you never saw her anymore. She didn't go to Jaws Fest. Did you ever hear Jaws Fest?
No, I didn't know there was one.
Fan expo thing. It was back in like 2005, and I didn't go, and I regret it because they did it for like 2 years. They turned the whole town into Amity again. They put up the regatta thing, and they made it like 1975, and you went there, and they took you on the locations, and then they actually showed the movie on the beach where the movie was filmed. And I mean, for a Jaws fan, it was incredible. I've met a few people who did video documentaries of that time, and they've sent them to me, and they're unbelievable. They're amazing. And a lot of the stars, the first one, a lot of the stars showed up. And I don't think she did, but he told me, this guy that I knew back then, he's actually passed away, but he told me that she was the toughest one to get. Now, Robert Shaw, of course, was almost impossible because he died 3 years after the movie was made. So not very many people got him. But I met also, who's the other one?
Well, there's Chrissy who's around. The girl plays Chrissy.
Susan Backlany. And I also met Jeffrey C. Kramer, who was Hendrix, the deputy. And I talked with him.
Yeah.
He was also in Halloween, too. That was his other movie. He was the dentist in Halloween.
Oh, okay.
And he was great to talk to. But what was cool about that at Chiller was that they had a whole bunch of props. This one guy, his name is Greg something, has a place upstate. He started collecting them. His dad must have known somebody on the production, got him the tank. Then he got parts of the Orca, and then it was all this. It just snowballed. He's got a ton of stuff, and it's all of the original stuff. It's amazing to see. So kind of like that was a lot of fun. But I did not get to go to Jaws Fest. I wish I had.
Your story of Richard Dreyfuss seems similar to mine because that's where I got to meet him. I wanted to meet Richard Dreyfuss a long time. Jaws, a Matt Hooper fanatic. I was as a kid. He was my favorite. He was funny. He was so cool. Yeah, and also I saw American Graffiti in the theater as a kid, and he's in that. And so I really like Richard Dreyfuss, and but he was always somebody. Oh, I want to meet Richard Dreyfuss so bad. Finally, I had my opportunity, like you did, and something was off. He didn't want to be there, like you said, and I was online, and I noticed. One of the things he did, it seemed like every time somebody was up there, he'd do something a little weird. Like, I remember a couple of people before me sat down next to him to get the photo, and he took the pen and put it in there and went like this. He did that. Okay, fine. And he seemed a little off, drunk. You want to say something was off?
He seemed like he was drunk to me.
Yeah, we might have been there the same day, and I don't remember which because he was there probably a couple of days. But yeah, and as I got up to him, I noticed he had ordered food from the hotel, a sandwich and fries, and it came, and he was signing while he had the fry while he was eating it.
Yeah.
So I just said to him, and when I got closer to the table, I was almost next, and I said, "So how's the food?" And he just looked up and he went like that. I'm like, okay.
Yeah.
The time came to get the picture. Now I'm happy. I've seen some poor autographs of his myself, like you said. They're all weird. I got one that was Hi Joe. He wrote Hi Joe on it, and he wrote R Dreyfuss.
Yeah,
and it was pretty good. And it's the picture. It's a black background. It's got the famous one with all three of the guys with the teeth, the shark teeth.
Oh yeah,
looking through the teeth.
The publicity shot.
And I got him to sign that, which is really nice. I wish Roy Scheider had been on that. It would have been really great.
Yep.
But it was and then when it came time to pose, he's wearing a cap. He's wearing some kind of cap or something in my picture.
I have a cap picture too. It's like an alien on it or something.
Yeah, and he's like this in the piece, like. He makes a real angry face, like.
Yeah.
I don't know why. That's what he did. $50 later, but I got it.
He's an Academy Award nominee. He probably didn't think he was ever going to have to do stuff like that. I still like him. I still appreciate him. I still think he's a great guy. But they always say don't meet your heroes, because when you do, you may be disappointed.
Oh, sometimes, like I say, I won't go into the Charlton Heston one. Maybe I met him a few times. The first time was absolute, just what you wanted him to be, just how you expected him. The professional, old school gentleman, so great. He asking me for my name, I'll say, like I'll tell a story quick. It's a long story, but I'll tell you just when it came, I saw him at NBC Studios, and I knew he was recording up there an interview. And when he was finished, he came out of the elevator. And there's more of a story to it, but I'll save that for another time. But the main thing is when he actually came over to me, I was like, I didn't know what to say, Mr. Heston. So happy to meet you. I mean, I put my hand out, he shook my hand, Here's Moses himself, this big larger than life figure. And he was I forgot to ask for the autograph. I was all ready to go. And I said, so nice to meet you. Oh, thank you. And he just walked away and he put his arm up like goodbye, like that. And I said, well, may I have your autograph? And he said, oh, sure. And he came over and he said, and what's your name? Well, I mean, for an autograph collector, somebody who admires a celebrity, to me, he actually asked me, he was going to personalize it,
Right.
which I like. So he personalized it, and I said, I didn't know what to say. You think you're always going to be able to know what to say to these people you admire? And it was a picture from Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and I said he didn't like doing the sequel. He didn't want to do the sequel.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to him, sorry, it's from Beneath the Planet of the Apes. Probably, your least favorite movie. I said, no, I didn't say probably. I said your least. I said your least favorite movie, Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and he said, not my least. So he assured me that it's not my least.
That's great.
And I found out later on, Call of the Wild is his least favorite movie that he did.
Yeah,
but so Jaws wise, did pretty well overall, huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like I said, it still holds up today.
Forget it.
I watch it multiple times a year. And every time I watch it, I see different things. If you watch the extras, the Islanders, the real Islanders, they're a crack up. The stuff that they do in the background and things that they did to try to draw attention to themselves. If I would have known the movie was going to be done, I mean, we lived in New York. It's not a far trip to Massachusetts. Again, my family really didn't travel. I think we did one trip to Washington, D.C. all through the time before my father and mother split too. But I was older. I was like 13 when it happened. And we never went anywhere. Like I said, my mother never really wanted to travel. But I think if I could have talked them into taking me to Martha's Vineyard around that time period, could you imagine? You'd be walking. That island is not large. I've been there. And it's not large. You walk around, you're going to bump into people. You would have bumped into cast, crew. You had Spielberg there. You had, just all of these people, Robert Shaw and, Richard Dreyfuss. And back then, they probably would have been even friendlier because, none of them were really, Robert Shaw had a career, but he wasn't this well-known actor that everybody, not until after The Sting and Jaws did he really, get that fame that he was looking for. And unfortunately, he died 3 years after that. But it's just great. That movie again is a life changer for me. A lot of people, it's Star Wars. For me, it was Jaws.
Jaws for me that's a big one. That's a big I got to see it. Have you seen it recently? The last few years, it's been around twice in theaters. I've seen it, but you got to see it on a big screen, folks. If you haven't seen Jaws on a big screen, you feel like you're out on the ocean with them. You have to see it on a big screen.
Absolutely.
And it's been in 3D recently, and I didn't know.
Yeah, I didn't do the 3D thing, but I did it was the what was it called? It was something else. It was 3D and it was the whatever the sound or something. But I got to see it, and it was just there weren't a lot of people there, and more than I expected. There was probably like 25 people in the theater, but I've seen it in the city. I've gone to one of the docks, on like where the Circle Line comes around and all that, and then they had it on one of the piers there. They played it at night. Bryant Park has shown it. Did you ever go to films of Bryant Park in Midtown Manhattan? I saw Bullet there with Steve McQueen. I saw Raiders of the Lost Ark was there. Jaws had played there. Anytime, like I said, and when the documentary "The Shark Is Still Working" came out, they did it. They did it down in the Village. They played it. Jaws one night. You bought the ticket. You got it for 2 nights. You saw Jaws the first night. The second night was "The Shark Is Still Working." And that's like a 2-hour documentary. It's terrific. Great. It's on the Blu-ray and the DVD set now.
Yes, I've seen it. What the thing is, I'm always fascinated whenever you watch these documentaries, the making of with
Yeah.
Jaws. Now, see, this is what I like about it too. We talked about practical effects and the
Hmm.
shark not working all the time and all this, and they had to shoot around that,
Yeah.
because it wasn't working all the time. And of course, it was a hell of a nightmare to make. And Spielberg says he still has nightmares about it and stuff.
Absolutely.
But as a fan, not as a filmmaker or an actor, as a fan, I'm so much more enthralled by what went on into making that what it was. They
Yeah.
didn't know it was going to be a great film. They thought it'd be just be a dog. They didn't know it was going to be
Right. What it
su-
was.
success. But you heard the stories about. I love things like hearing they had to wait on the ocean. Richard Dreyfuss said something like maybe you'd get everything set up, and
Mhm.
then there would be a sailboat that would be over here,
Horizon. Yeah.
and it would move the horizon. It would take like 3 hours for the thing to get to the other side
And by
after
then
you
the
got
lights changed, and now we got
the
to throw.
light changed. Yeah, and people like, oh, and younger people. No offense, please. I don't want to lump everybody in together. Well, younger, I know a lot of cool young people that is with it and sophisticated with this stuff, but they're like, oh, come on, dude, just at least just go on the computer. You don't even have to be there. Like yeah, you just have to be home, and we could just like put it on the computer, and you'll be on the ocean. I like that they got seasick, or
Hmm.
they had to go through all this to make this masterpiece. Makes it all the more fascinating to me.
Exactly. Stories, yeah, and that movie is well documented, and I know it's. I mean, it started a lot of movie careers. It started a lot of directors. That book, The Jaws Log, is considered a movie making bible by many. Eli Roth and I think Edgar Wright. There's a bunch of directors today that
Mm.
signal that film as seminal in their, appreciation for film and for movie making. And I
Yep,
mean,
yep. I bought the Jaws log paperback when it came out, and I devoured it to the point where I looked at it
yeah,
so much yeah,
yeah.
it split. And now
Mhm.
there's another copy I got of it in a blue
Yeah.
book. It's a blue cover or something.
Yeah, well, he's done anniversary, with the 30th anniversary or 25th anniversary, 45th anniversary, whatever it is. He's done subsequent volumes, and he's added some things to them. I bought a few of them. I have a couple of copies, but yeah, Jaws. I've got a whole wall of Jaws like memorabilia and all that
That's
stuff.
great, great.
That's the one that really started. That's when I started to realize, hey, you can get these things now. Why back in the day I didn't go to the theater and befriend the manager and say, hey, can I have
Yeah,
that? Because if I would have done that, I'd have Escape from New York, I'd have The Thing, I'd have Halloween, I would have Dawn of the Dead, I would have all these posters that now are almost impossible to get. And I ordered Jaws, Planet of the Apes pictures, lobby cards, and stuff from a place called the Movie Poster Place in Pennsylvania.
mhm.
And I remember the lobby card set for Beneath the Planet of the Apes cost us $20. We chipped in, my best friend and I, and we got them and we split them 4 and 4, and then we switched. So every once in a while, I'd have the 4 up on the wall, he'd have the other 4 up. I'd go to his house and look at his, and he'd come to my house and look at mine, and then we'd switch them, and that was how you did it. And we had them for years. And again, they've since gone away, and I've had to pick them up again. I'm still trying to get the whole set, and yeah, it's there. Everything is just like I said. That stuff is highly collectible now, and with eBay and online auctions and stuff, the stuff is just skyrocketing.
Well, it wasn't like that. But, nobody was really talking about collecting this too much of this stuff in that
No,
period, early '80s, '70s, early '80s.
mm-mm.
Now it's insane. Forget it.
Yep.
But back then, not so much.
No,
And you had mentioned, I think you said you didn't. You didn't have all the one sheets to the Apes films, Planet of the Apes,
no. I
because
have
I
the
actually got
Go Eight poster, and that was it back then. Now it's
yeah,
gone. Now I have the double feature Planet Beneath,
yeah.
and I have Conquest. I have the Battle half sheet, but I don't have Escape, and I don't have Beneath by itself or
I
Conquest.
have a beneath. It's not a half sheet. It's what do they call it? Insert the narrow
Yes.
one.
Yeah,
I have a beautiful one with the split face, the mutant and Ertz's.
that's
I,
cool.
I got that. That's cool. But I actually had Chiller, and I want to say it was like 1991, maybe Chiller. It was a long time ago.
Mhm.
I got the one sheets for Escape, Conquest, and Battle for like $5 a piece, and the guy had them, the way they have with the cardboard
Mhm.
backing, and everything.
Yeah, yeah.
And I dragged them home on the sub from the sub at the time on the train and everything to get it.
Now
But
these
yeah, I got those, and I had when I saw Roddy McDowell, he signed the Conquest one.
Oh,
You know,
nice, nice.
which is nice. I want to get wrap it up soon, but before I do, I
Mhm.
thought we would talk a little bit about and get your feelings on the stuff. We didn't talk about the Universals really much, but the monsters, Carl Lugosi,
Oh,
that we can
yeah,
we
okay. You could
we
do a
can,
whole
we
show.
did the House of Frankenstein. We talked about it a little
A
bit,
little bit, a little bit.
All right, Wolfman and stuff. That's right. Like I said, short. But the slasher films now, I always preferred subtle, the old stuff. I love Rosemary's Baby, but
Oh yeah,
occasionally I don't mind watching all out crazy stuff, gore
me
stuff.
too. I love it.
That's what I was going to ask you. I am a huge. I don't know how you stand with this. Out of all the guys, Michael Myers, Freddy Krueger, Jason, etc., I'm a Jason guy.
Hmm.
He's my favorite of all of them. And I think what I like about it so much is that to me, because loving the old Universal Frankenstein movies, I love how like he comes back again. Like they find different ways of bringing him back, like they used to do with the
Hmm.
monster.
Right.
In the sulfur pit. Then he comes out of the sulfur pit.
Yep.
Jason is the bottom of the ocean, and then he rises out of the ocean or whatever. The electric.
They even do a
And
Frankenstein thing with him in six, with
that's it.
and the lightning hits him, and he drives that spike in him, and then the lightning. Yeah, yeah.
And the director Tom McLaughlin. I'm
I
trying to
think
remember
so.
his name. He in six said that he was influenced. He used the universe. He was a fan. He did Universal and Hammer stuff. It's what he did,
Yeah.
and that's why I love Jason so much. But I didn't see the original in the theater, but I saw every one of them
Hmm.
from part two on. Mostly the night they came out. It
Right.
got to
Right.
and boy, I got some. That's a whole video in itself, which I'll do sometime, talking about the personal experiences of what I had, especially
Okay.
the 3D one.
The 3D one, yeah.
It was insane. I saw it at the multiplex, Valley Street multiplex,
Hmm.
and the place was wrecked. And that's how I don't. Now you're used to hearing this stuff. Oh, they did this in the theater. They did that. But
Hmm.
it was such a mob scene for that movie. Everything got like destroyed.
Yeah.
People rushed to get to the screen. And yeah, so I love those movies. Halloween movies.
Me too.
Someday we can talk more about them, maybe. But what's your general feeling of these?
Well, again, we grew up with these. Now we're teenagers and a little older. You're a little older. Those movies were the go-to thing. I saw Halloween with two girls, and that was the most exciting experience I ever had. They were friends of mine, but it was great because they had their arms dug into their nails had dug into my arms because they were terrible. It was a scary experience. Halloween's my favorite. I'm a big John Carpenter fan. I followed his career, but I do love the Jason movies. I like Nightmare on Elm Street. I like the first Nightmare on Elm Street's kind of or hit and miss. Most of the Jason movies I do like. I do find I like number two because I love Amy Steele. I love the
Yeah.
final. I like her. I think she's really resourceful. I find that to be the most believable. I think, but I love the kills in the first one. I saw that the midnight showing Friday the 13th. I did that with a few horror movies: Creep Show, Friday the 13th, Maniac. I love Maniac.
Maniac, yeah, with Joe Spinell.
Love that movie.
Like I said, let me know some of these days. We'll do a Maniac show. That's fine
Yeah.
with it,
Yeah, well, yeah, I have the poster. I have a lot of that stuff. Yeah, that's the kind of stuff. The Grindhouse stuff is the stuff I've really spent my time on lately. For the past 10 years, I've been watching a lot of exploitation movies. I do a lot of it on my show because that's what I like to talk about. But I mean, I've just been, anytime I cover Universal horror, it gets the views go up. Anytime I show famous monsters, the views go up. So I mean, it's that kind of stuff. I did a Jaws trivia thing, a really hard Jaws trivia test. That was fun. I mean, stuff like that. But yeah, I love all of it. Horror is my absolute favorite genre of all time. I'm a big Steve McQueen fan. I love Steve. He's my favorite actor. But again, it didn't start out that way. But I grew to really love him. Seen all of his movies, own all of his movies, that kind of thing.
Right.
But I like it all. I mean, I really do. I could talk musicals. I could talk silent films. I could go all. I like it all. I've got a really. I don't mind collecting anything. If I see movie paper at a yard sale or a flea market, I usually pick it up. no matter
But
what
see,
it
what
is.
happens is sometimes, at least with me, I get influenced by other people. Like, my big thing now is I put a lot of the movie stuff is in the closets. A
Hmm.
lot of it's out of the way. That up there, I was going to take this Beatles stuff up to the middle, and then
Yep.
I was going to take some of these things I have movie wise, take them down, and put Beatles up. Now that I'm talking to you and getting really excited about this stuff
Excited.
again, it's like,
Hey,
wait a
I
minute.
want. That's what I'm talking about. You get people excited about these movies, get them to revisit them or watch them for the first time. There's nothing like introducing a movie to, because I did the Planet of the Apes show, and one of the comments, this was the best comment I've ever got. Some guy said, before I watched your video, I could care less about the Planet of the Apes.
Yeah.
He had seen it and he said, I could care less. He goes, but now seeing your enthusiasm, I feel like I should revisit these movies. That was like the
Hmm.
best compliment I could have ever gotten, because that's what I want to do. I want to bring these movies to light again. Even stuff like I think I watched one of yours about the brain that wouldn't die
Yeah.
and in the pan. Now that I love that stuff. Now, if you can get
Right.
people interested in that, yeah, it's schlock cinema, but it's history. It's film history. And that's the stuff that I like to cover: the Hammer films, the older stuff, the stuff from the 50s, the 40s, everything, all of it.
Yeah. We
You
didn't
know,
even talk about Hammer, but maybe some
Oh,
other
I know.
time.
And again, horror has a really cool arc because it comes and goes. It's got peaks and valleys. It just, there's periods of time when it's the tops, and then it's garbage, and then something reinvents the genre and it goes straight to the top again. And that doesn't happen with a lot of other genres. Musicals are basically nil now. Westerns, even other than TV stuff, you'll see a Western pop up every once in a while. But back in the 50s, everything was the Western. The Western, sci-fi and the Western were the two king, genres. Not even just film, but television. I mean, there was a Western on every single channel consistently on television in the 50s. I mean, it was so more than I've ever even heard of. And I feel like I've seen a lot of them, but it's the same thing with musicals, and that kind of stuff were big back then. Now horror films are always going to have a place because it's a thing, but in today's world, the horror films are not the kind of things that I'm interested in. You talked about Terrifier. That's another one we
I
keep
was
talking,
going to bring that up. Yeah.
because Terrifier was the one that I discovered, and I actually have a like for it because it harks back to the old thing, and he's all about practical effects, and I admire that.
Well, yeah. Well, I put a video up about it, as you saw, and I started to watch Terrifier too because somebody I know, this
Yeah,
guy that
I rented it online and watched it. I didn't see
he
it.
yeah, Terrifier too. I felt not because I put it on when I was too tired, and I lasted about 10 minutes, but the first 10 minutes got me interested
Yeah,
in Terrifier too. So I'm gonna really watch it because I'm trying to get more involved. A lot of these channels, I made a video about this too. They're concerned with so much. To them, an old movie is like from 1990 or 1980. Maybe they'll go to the 80s and Jason and all that stuff.
right.
But yeah, they don't. Some of the older videos I did a year ago, I've talked about a lot of the universals. I talked about other 30s movie. I was on a 30s movie kick for a while. Talked about those. But I'm trying to get into a little bit more of what's out there now. Believe it or not, you know what I want to see that I hear atrocious things about, but the concept is so crazy that I want to see it? The Winnie the Pooh movie.
Oh yeah, that Pooh and Piglet thing with it's like a slasher movie.
Winnie the Pooh, Blood and Honey.
Yeah.
Winnie the Pooh, something about Christopher Robin has neglected him over the years and his friends and something, and now he reverts back to his feral state, and he's gonna like kill Christopher Robin and the girls he's with and all this stuff. And it's just such a bizarre thing. And I thought at first I hear these things and I'm like, why are they gonna turn our nursery rhymes into
Yeah.
killer movies? I don't like that genre, but I don't know why I'm intrigued by that, but I'm going to try to get familiar with it because so many people they don't they only talk about the new ones, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean I'm here to do what I like. If that means old movies, that's going to be old movies. That's what I like. But
Exactly.
occasionally I like to keep abreast of what's going on.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I see new movies now and again, but again, most of the time it's not in the theater because I don't want to spend the money. It's outrageous, the cost of ticket sales, and for my family to go to a movie, it's over $50,
Oh,
and that's insane.
how much?
Over $50.
Well, you go for with the family, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it's me, my son, my wife. If we go, it's you're getting popcorn, you're getting candy, you're getting everything, and it it runs into over
I'm
$50.
surprised it's not more than that. It
Yeah,
depends,
well,
you
it
know.
might be now. We haven't gone in a long time, but
When I saw a man called Otto the other day, Tom
mhm.
Hanks movie, and which I enjoyed, but it was derivative of a lot of other similar movies. I've seen so many like that,
Yeah, yeah.
but it was good, I thought. But it was like 850 each, and I thought, oh, it's the first film of the
Hmm.
day, so it's like, oh 850, you know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, look, I gotta go now. I guess I could do this another 2 hours, you know. But the thing is, let's wrap it up here. I can't tell
Okay.
you again, like I said earlier, what a pleasure this is for me. What a pleasure it has been having talked about all these things
You too.
with
Yeah,
you.
absolutely. It's great to connect with, people of like minds, and we have a lot of similarities, as you've pointed out. So it's
Yeah.
great to talk about it.
And if you ever wanted to come on again, I would love it. I would talk about other things. There's so many categories when it comes to our films that we like
Yeah,
to talk
yeah.
about. So, everybody, once again, it's Darren Franz, and his channel is called Cinema Chat
Hmm.
on YouTube. And you'll get more than your usual Cinema Chat, though. You'll get to see a lot of really good paper stuff, you know, collectible stuff,
Collectibles.
artifacts, and things. All right.
Yep.
All right, Darren, take care. And everybody, thank you so
You
much
too.
for watching.